Welcome, everyone. This is Ginger Elliott-Teague. We are here to start the webinar for the end-of-year data reporting. We do expect this to go at least an hour, maybe all the way to an hour and a half. There's quite a bit of information. When we did this in person, we are taking out some of the slides that we did in person, but we went to about 2.5 hours. So just to let you know that this will be quite a long presentation, so feel free to ask questions at any time. We will be stopping at a few points to make sure that you have some time to clarify anything or respond to any information that you hear. Okay, so to start with, just a refresher on why we collect this data and these particular data elements. We do have federal reporting requirements that dictate what states must collect, and all states must collect the same information. All states are then judged and scored for their compliance on the data. Not only is it accurate and complete, but is it submitted timely? So we have the same requirements that we ask you to adhere to: timely, accurate, and complete data submissions. And if you are randomly interested, or if you find you have some free time, you can go and look at Oklahoma's results, and you can compare that to other states. There's a website called osep.grads360, and you can check that out and see multiple years of information for all states. So that may be something you're interested in on a random rainy day like today. I don't know. So as part of that process, we are required to also ensure that districts are compliant. So we have to hold to the same standards that we hold you to, and that is why timely, accurate, and complete district data is good for all of us. So we will try to hold you to that and ask that you help the state by submitting data that is high quality. Okay, so a few critical deadlines. We are going to pull data from EdPlan late on July 1. So you will have until 9 a.m. on July 1 to clean up and submit your data. We, as you know, with advanced reporting, we will pull most of the data from advanced reporting. It takes about 24 hours, 18 to 24 hours to pull data over into AR from EdPlan. So you have to have that completed by 9 a.m. on July 1st. And that is a Monday, so be ready early in the morning to get that completed. Ideally by Friday, the Friday before, so you don't have to work over the weekend or on that Monday, of course, but whenever you can. Then superintendents will be able to certify between July 2nd, starting July 2nd, and July 16th. Okay, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but if a superintendent certifies early, we will clear that. Okay, so superintendents cannot certify until July 2nd. So we ask that all data be entered by July 1, that Monday morning. So data reporting topics that we'll talk about today. We have two places where we collect data. We collect self-reported data from the district summary data page, and that includes information about the 45-day timeline requirements. Have you met those compliance requirements, the early childhood transition requirements, CEIS participation and personnel, FTEs. We collect that from you directly. We don't have good reports at this point to collect that from EdPlan, so we ask you to submit those findings to us. And then we also pull 4 major data sets directly from student records in EdPlan. So exiting, secondary transition, early childhood outcomes, and discipline. So discipline you have to enter in the student record, but exiting, secondary transition, and early childhood outcomes, we will pull whatever is there on July 1. So if you have not cleaned your data by July 1, then whatever is in there is what we pull, and we assume that it's complete and accurate. Okay, so make sure you take a look at it and that it is correct. We will also talk a little bit about certification. And then very, very briefly, we will introduce you to the advanced reporting reports, just how to find them. We don't have time in this presentation to cover those in any level of detail. So we're just going to point you to them, and then if you have questions about how to use them and what they mean, we will help you with that either over the phone, or we have an advanced reporting manual that you can review also. Okay. So a few data quality notes as we get started that just help ensure that your data is the best it can be. We need you between now and June 30th. First thing is to update your contact information in the LEA agreement. So some of you throughout the year have called us or emailed us and said, hey, I'm not getting information through the listserv, I'm not getting your emails, or someone else is receiving them who shouldn't. We rely on the contact information supplied through the LEA agreement in the grants management system as our primary source of contact information. So there are boxes in there, fields in there where whoever completes that agreement can write out who is the special education contact. There's fields for superintendent contact, for finance contacts, those sorts of things. So we pull that information for special education contact. Because that changes annually, we pull that once a year. And if it's not correct, we don't know that until you tell us. So please make sure at this time of year to go in there or talk to whoever works that documentation to make sure that the correct contact person is in there. Emails are correct and names are correct. We get a lot of mistyped emails also, so make sure those are correct in there. Second, update your site codes. We know this past year and this upcoming year that some of you will be adding new school sites. You may be taking away school sites or changing the grade span, things like that at some of your sites. Make sure that you update site codes in EdPlan to match what the site code is for the state, the official state code. So if you have questions about what those are, we can point you to those or assist finding those. But to update those, you just go into the school information in the schools tab and update those in EdPlan. And again, we're happy to walk you through that the first time too, if you have questions about how to do that. Next data quality note. Last year, 92% of all Sooner Start records came to districts electronically. They were shared as inactive files in your districts. So Sooner Start has done a great job sharing those files with you. Unfortunately, only 60% of files were ever activated. Now, not every file needs to be activated, but 60% is pretty low. For your teachers, for your related services personnel, if they don't have the right access to EdPlan, they will not be able to see inactive records, so they will not ever be able to review those Sooner Start records as prior to a transition planning conference. So make sure that you activate those records so everyone who needs to see them can see them. Then another data quality note, check your exit codes. Okay, we have, there's a code called unknown, and the unknown code is meant to be temporary. So if you use that, or if you see that a student has that code, make sure that you change that to whatever is accurate. If you need help figuring out what that code should be, we may be able to find that in the WAVE data. So check those. The other thing to check is that in student history, if a student happens to be missing an exit reason, and we have quite a few of those this year, check to see whether there are duplicate exits and reentry events in the student's student history page. If there are duplicate exits and reentries, it is likely that the system cannot identify the correct exit date and exit reason. So you're going to have to delete those. We are happy to walk you through that and assist you with that, but this is only for students who are inactive whose exit codes are missing. So check those, and if you know how to delete those exits and reentry events, then please do so. The next thing, the final thing we'll talk about, is event timelines. We have a new report this year that is for information only at this point. It's an eligibility timeline report. One of the issues with that report is that it's pulling odd parent consents. It's pulling some behavior assessment consents, other things like that. But if the parent consent is listed after eligibility on the student history page, the timeline will be thrown off and it will look like no eligibility was done after parent consent. So it will be counting your timeline incorrectly. So make sure that the events are in the correct order in student history. You can change those and revise those without going through written notice or anything like that if the dates are legitimate and predefined. But if you have questions about how to adjust your timelines, let us know. Okay. So let's jump into the district summary data page. This, again, is information that you submit directly to us as aggregate data for your district. So to find this page, it is administrator access only. You access it through the green menu bar, the administrator dropdown, open the district summary data page. It is blank right now. If you haven't looked at it yet, there is no data on that page. All boxes are empty. So you need to complete that prior to June 30th. Pages that are not completed, incomplete pages, are flagged as not timely and non-compliant. So if you find that you get a non-timely for end-of-year data submission, it's likely because you didn't complete your district summary data page. So make sure that page is done by July 1, June 30th. Okay. Now you can update and save this page multiple times if you need to enter some information and then you find that later it changes or you found some new eligibilities that you need to count. You can change that as many times as you want prior to the deadline. Any boxes that you have no data for, so you had 0 late eligibilities, for example, make sure you put a 0 in that box. Empty boxes we flag as incomplete because we do not know what is supposed to be there. We cannot assume that an empty box is a 0, so make sure you put those zeros in there. That is the only way we know that you've looked at the page and have updated your data. Okay, so the first set of information on that page that you will submit is what we call Indicator 11. It's the 45-day timeline. Some people call it child find requirement. And the purpose for this, we have to report accounted delays and the reasons for delay in completing all initial evaluations in the state. So once parental consent is given, that starts the timeline, and you have 45 days, school days, to complete your initial evaluation. There are 2 broad categories of delay, family reasons and other reasons, and we'll talk through those. But we have to submit this federally and need this information from you. Okay, so this is what that page looks like. It's the first box on the district summary data page. The first entry, the total referrals, you will not change this yourself, okay? This is an automated sum of the boxes below. So when you enter data for 1 and 2 listed there on the left, then it will sum to the total for the total referrals. Make sure that number is correct, and if it's not correct, try to figure out where the number, what data you are missing for that. Okay. So line 1 is evaluations completed within 45 school days. These are your timely evaluations, so count those and give us that number. Then the next 2, 2A and 2B, are evaluations that were not completed timely due to family reasons. So maybe the child changed districts prior to eligibility determination, maybe the parent failed or refused to produce the child. Okay. If you are a district that you started consent, maybe you started the evaluation process, but the student has moved districts in between, you are no longer liable for meeting that timeline. It will show an ed plan that you are out of date, possibly, depending on how you complete that. But you just report that here as an evaluation, a consent that was received, a referral, and the child moved. If you are a district that a student moves into your district after receiving consent somewhere else, you do not count that. You are no longer liable for that timeline. Instead of 45 days, you have to complete it in the the most reasonable time possible. I think the language is based on parental input. So complete that as soon as you can, but you do not report it here for the 45-day timeline compliance. Okay. The next set is, so if you look down here at line C, okay, parent refusal to sign consent for evaluation caused delays. This is a holdover from the form back when it was in single sign-on. This no longer applies to this indicator. If you don't get consent, you can't start timeline. So this one will always be 0. If we see a number here, we'll contact you and check to verify where that number should be, but this will always be 0. The next set, line D, are your other reasons for delay. Okay, and these are considered unexcused. So family reasons are considered excused reasons from the perspective of compliance. All other late evaluations have to be reported in a couple of ways. So you put that count here over on the right in that box, and then down below you mark in those check boxes however many reasons your late evaluations why they were delayed. So if it was because you failed to follow appropriate procedures or you had a lack of resources, you just check those boxes. We don't need counts down below. Just check the boxes for however many reasons applied to your late evaluations. Okay. Okay. It's looking like a couple people are having trouble hearing things, so hopefully I think it's just an individual, just a couple of individuals. Okay. Okay. So yes, this page is for only initial evaluations. Do not count re-evals here. They are not bound by the 45-day timeline compliance. Only count initials. Okay. Now the other thing for this, if you have any late evaluations, you must submit a list of those students whose evaluations were late for non-family reasons in an Excel document to us, okay? And we'll talk through how to do that in a little bit, but we have to know the student's name, we have to know their STN, and we have to know the reason for delay, okay? We have a template for you that we can show you if you have any of those, but this is another thing. If you don't submit that Excel document on time, you will be considered untimely for the submission of end-of-year data, okay? So make sure you get that to us if you have any other late evaluations. The last thing on this page is something that we report federally. We don't use this at any level for districts. We just take the maximum number of days beyond the 45th day needed to complete the most tardy evaluation for the whole state. So you give us your number. If you were late by 1 day, if you were late by 15 days, 90 days, you just put that number in there, and then we take that and submit the highest number for the state to OSDE. So that's all we use that for, but we do have to have that information. So please put in the maximum number of days that an evaluation was delayed. Okay. So a few notes on this. Again, only count initials. Include your Sooner Start referrals in all counts if you received parent consent to do additional evaluations. Include all disabilities. So we get this question periodically. Do we count speech kids in this? Yes. Speech services or special education services, you get consent for evaluation. Count those students also. Count all disabilities as initial evaluations. Okay? So this is what I was talking about. If you have any other late evaluations, you have to create a list of the names of students whose evaluations were late and the reason for delay. Upload the document. We have a template called the 45-day timeline file to EdPlan in the data test area, and we'll walk through how to do that in a little bit, but we have to have that information. It's for findings of noncompliance that we have to issue because this is a 100% compliance indicator. Okay, all states are required to be 100% compliant, and if we're not, we have to report every student who was not compliant for this. Okay, so we need that information from you. Okay, indicator 12, early childhood transition. So this is another 100% compliant indicator. So the state and districts are expected to meet this guideline, this requirement 100% of the time. We have to report the counts of eligibility outcomes for children transitioning from Sooner Start and the reasons for delay. So why were you not able to get the eligibility and IEP completed by the third birthday? So there are two broad categories of delay for this one too: family refusal / declined services, and then other reasons. Yes, include Sooner Start referrals only if further assessment was needed. So if you're just relying on previous information from Sooner Start and you don't have to get a new consent, then you do not need to report it. Think about getting consents for initial evaluations. When you do that, you have to report it. Great. Okay. This is the second big box on that page. It's indicator 12, early childhood transition. So again, that first box at the top, this is an auto sum of the boxes below. You won't be able to edit it without changing the boxes 1 through 5. And then the next rows just enter the information, the counts that you had. So if you had no Sooner Start referrals, then just enter 0 in everything, okay? But if you have at least one Sooner Start referral, determine which line those eligibilities fall into. So if the students were determined not eligible and everything was done before the third birthday, enter that in line 1. If you had students found eligible and everything was done timely, enter that in line 2. Line 3 is considered the family reason. This is the only one that's considered a family reason. Parent refused consent or declined services. So we know, and this happens periodically in all districts, a student may be referred from Sooner Start. The family tells Sooner Start that they want to talk to the district, but then later, before the third birthday, the family decides that they no longer want to proceed. So you would report that here, okay? So either they decline services, they don't want to continue, or they refuse consent to additional evaluation. So report those here. The next line, okay, so this line and the very last line on this page are two circumstances of late referrals from Sooner Start. So it's important to distinguish these. So there are two circumstances. First, if a student has been served by Sooner Start, so they've been with Sooner Start for 2 years or 9 months, they've been receiving services for quite a while, but Sooner Start does not get you the referral until 90 days, less than 90 days before the third birthday. Okay, so they are late reporting to you that a referral is coming. That is considered a late referral from Sooner Start, and you mark that down in the box at the very bottom. You just check that box if that happens. That is not considered an excused reason for delay. So because this is 100% compliance, OSEP expects that districts will complete these evaluations and IEPs by the third birthday, even if Sooner Start or any Part C program refers the child to the state within 90 days prior to the third birthday. So sometimes this is the fault of Sooner Start, but most of the time this is because families have taken a long time to decide whether or not they want to transition to the district. So if the family takes a long time, then that's just part of it, and that would be reported as a late referral from Sooner Start. However, if the child has come to Sooner Start within 90 days of the third birthday, so they've only very recently started services with Sooner Start, and so because they are late to Sooner Start, they are late to you, that is considered a late referral to Sooner Start, and that's reported there in line 4. So that you would report here the number of students who were referred to Part C less than 90 days before the third birthday. Okay, so you report those two circumstances in 2 different places. If you have questions about that as you start to fill out this information, let us know. We can help you figure out which one was which. We do have a report, the Early Childhood Transition Report, and that will tell you if a student was referred to Sooner Start at a late date. Okay, and we won't be able to walk through that in this presentation, but if you have questions about that report, we can assist you with that. The next line is considered other reasons. So any IEP that wasn't completed by the third birthday and not included in the above groups would be reported in line 5. And again, you check the boxes down below for the reasons for delay. For these also, you must submit a list of students and the reasons for delay if they fell into this last group. And again, just like for indicator 11, if you had a late evaluation and a late IEP, you need to tell us the maximum number of days beyond the third birthday that those were completed. Okay, we have to know that number. We just report that to OSEP, and we don't use that for any purpose other than that. So just tell us how many days past the third birthday was the most tardy IEP or eligibility / non-eligibility. Okay. A few notes. Reasons for not completing the so if you have students who came to you from Sooner Start and you wanted to do an initial evaluation on them, and that initial evaluation was delayed, you need to consider whether or not that reason for delay applies also to the Sooner Start box. So any student who comes in from Sooner Start, you may report them twice. You have to report them under indicator 12. You may report them under indicator 11 if you do an additional evaluation and get consent for that. Okay. So if there are three sort of circumstances here. You may be late for the 45-day timeline, but get everything done before the third birthday. So it's late on one, but not the other. You may get it done within 45 days, but not prior to the third birthday. So again, that's on time with the first one, but not the second. And you may be late on both. So if that's the case, make sure that the reasons for delay align for that particular student. Again, a special note, if you have any delayed evaluations and IEPs that were not due to family reasons, then you need to submit that list to us in an Excel file with the name of the students, the STNs, and the reasons for delay. And we have a template for that also. It's the EC transition template, and you submit that through data test. We have the templates on our website. You can download those now. They're the non-compliance templates, and can start working on those. I know in larger districts that you may have a longer list, so make sure that that information is complete. If you submit it to us in a PDF that is not clear, we may ask for that in Excel, and you may have to redo it because sometimes the lists of students are not clear to us as to the reasons for delay and such. So we need that information to match as closely as possible to what we have to submit federally. Okay, so the data test tool, we call it a document sharing tool. It's really just a fake student in EdPlan. So it's the last name of test, first name of data. To find this fake student, search for this student and select the name. So again, just search for last name test, first name data. If you do not see the student in your EdPlan system, likely it was inactivated or deleted because someone thought, well, why is this crazy student sitting in my student list? Well, we put it there so that we can share documents and data without violating FERPA. We are not allowed to ask for student information over email. So this is the best tool that we have to share student level information as quickly as possible. The moment you upload it, we can see the document. So it's instantaneous document sharing, much faster than mailing flash drives or paper copies or anything like that. So please use this. This is where you will submit your Excel files. And in fact, anytime you want us to look at student records for any purpose, this is a great place to put them. Just give us a call, say, hey, I've uploaded some data or I've uploaded some documents to data test. Can you look at those with me? And we can open them immediately and check them with you. So it's a really good tool. We are the only ones who can see that. No other district can see it. So it's private information and secure. Okay. So personnel, we have to report the count of FTEs of related services personnel and paraprofessionals who serve students on IEPs. This is federal reporting. We don't use this data at this time. We are thinking about how to do that, to think about and offer recommendations on vacancies and short staffing. circumstances and things like that. But for now, we just take the data you give us and send it to OSEP in a personnel report, I think, in November. Okay, so there are 11 discipline categories that we report under related services. We report both fully certified and not fully certified. And then for paraprofessionals, we report qualified and not qualified. The pairs are a little bit tricky because we have to report those by age group. So we have to report the count of paras serving ages 3 to 5 and the count serving ages 6 to 21. So what that means is if you have a para serving in a kindergarten class, well, there's 5 and 6-year-olds in that class. So you will need, if that para is a full-time assistant, then you will need to divide the time spent in that classroom by how much time they work with 5-year-olds and how much time they work with 6-year-olds. So it might be a 0.4, 0.6 division. It might be half and half. You do not need to go in and observe how much time they work with 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. Make your best guess estimate based on either the count of students or the who you know to be in that classroom that that person is working with. You don't need to make try to get it as precise as possible. Do the best you can. Most of these are considered solid estimates. They are not perfect numbers, and OSEP knows that. So we just report the best we can and go on. Okay, so this is what that box looks like. Does qualified for a para? I do not know. So the question was, does qualified for a para include OSDE paraprofessional Tier 2 certification? We have documentation that in our end-of-year data collection manual that talks about how to identify certification and how to know if someone's qualified or not qualified. I would follow that guidance. That document will be on our website this week. We had a long delay getting that completed. It took 3 weeks longer than we expected from our communications office. So it is now done, and we will have that up this week. Okay, so thinking about related services personnel, I want to cover a few that are fairly straightforward and then talk about some categories that are a little bit trickier to report. So we have audiologists, speech language pathologists, interpreters, psychologists. If you have a psychometrist, report that person as a psychologist. Okay, so if you have a psychometrist who comes in and does evaluations half-time or works with students half-time, report that under psychologists. OTs and PTs are straightforward. And then the last one, number 11, orientation and mobility specialists. Those are pretty straightforward too. Okay, just report how much time during the week those positions work with special education students. The others are trickier. We have PE teachers, social workers, medical nursing staff, and counselors. These are trickier because typically a district will have one of these full-time or part-time working in the district with all students. So we have to report these as the percentage of time that they work with special education students, but specifically related to the student's disability needs. So, for example, PE teachers. Last year we had a district report 5 PE teachers. So that was a number that flagged as unusual when we started cleaning the data. And so I called them up and said, do you really have 5 PE teachers who only work with special education students in your district? And the person said, well, of course not. They're just our general PE teachers. So the next question I had was, how much time do they provide PE services to special education students to account for their disabilities? And she said, none. They serve all students equally. Our SPED students are just in their classrooms like all other students. So that needed to be reported as a 0, not 5. So think about how social workers, how nurses, how counselors and PE teachers, how much of their time do they provide services either listed on an IEP or related to a student's disability. Okay, that's what you will report. You will not report that you have one full-time social worker who works with all students equally. Counselors are a little bit tricky because if you have a secondary counselor who provides extra services to special education students for transition purposes, talking through planning, talking through goals and other things like that, assisting with employment, then you would count that time that they dedicate to special education students because it's above and beyond what they may provide to others and it's related to their disability. Okay. If you have specific questions as you complete this form about how to report an FTE, just give us a call and we can walk you through that. Now again, every box, if you have no one providing these services, put a 0 in there. We have to have that complete with zeros if you have no one providing those services. Question, does therapeutic recreation specialist include going to a hippotherapy services outside the district during the school day? I will need to check on that. I do not know that. So we will record that question and look into that. Yes, only lists personnel who serve special education students. And it can be part-time. So we have had in the past 0.02 psychologists, 0.04 nurses. Okay, so you will have partial time and that's okay. We report this aggregated for the state of Oklahoma. So those 0.02s, 0.05s add up for the state. So report those hours accurately. Okay, so a few notes on that. Only consider personnel employed or on contract as of child count of last year. So if last fall you had an SLP working in your district and you only had one, but this spring you realized you needed a second one so that you could provide all the services you needed to provide to all of your students. Only report the person hired and on staff as of last year. So don't add the second person that you hired this year. Okay? So only those employed or on contract as of last year. Contracted services do count, both employed or on contract. If you are paying for the services, you count them. If you are not paying for the services, so if you have counselors from a local therapy center or nonprofit, or if you have a nurse coming to assist a student who's paid for by the local hospital, do not count those individuals. Only count the individuals that your district pays for. In co-ops, that can get a little bit tricky. So if you're part of a co-op, give us a call. We can help you with that. But you need to contact your co-op and have them determine for you what % of time their staff work with your students. Okay? So that's important. If you are paying the co-op to provide services, they hire the people, you get to report as your district how many people you are paying for and what % of time. Count your average hours served, and you can, on the slide we say count average hours served by school week, but you can do it in 3 different ways. If you have someone who comes weekly, then calculate it by school week. If you have someone who comes monthly, you can calculate it average hours per month. If you have someone who comes only a couple times a year, then you can count that average hours per year. So if you have a psychologist who has come in, provided services, done evaluations for 10 hours throughout the whole school year, then you would count 10 divided by your total number of hours for the year, and that would be what you would report for that psychologist. Okay, round to the nearest hundredth and report those. We do have an FTE calculator for districts that need that. It's typically best to use that if you are a large district and have a lot of people to calculate, but it can be helpful to store information and save information over time, particularly if you have the same people providing services every year or if they just adjust a little bit. So we can walk you through how to use that also. Does that include alternative education? Not if it's a teacher. We don't report teachers at all. So if alt ed is considered a related service of some kind, maybe counseling or something, then you might report that there. But otherwise, you would not count that. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So the next set of information we report on this page, this is the last bit from the district summary data page. For LEAs that reserve funding for CEIS, we have to report the count of students who received those services and the count of students who received services in the past and are now on IEPs. So CEIS stands for Coordinated Early Intervening Services. If you don't know what this is and think that you probably haven't reserved funds, then you don't need to report these numbers. We have a list of districts, and I'll show you that in just a minute, that did reserve funds last year and do need to report, but most districts do not. We only had 8. So we'll walk you through what you need to report if you were not one of those. So which students can receive CEIS if it's voluntary set-aside? Voluntary set-aside is up to 15% of special education funding. Can serve students kindergarten through grade 12 who are not identified as needing special ed. Comprehensive CEIS, which is going to change soon. This is for all ages 3 through grade 12, and any groups of students can be served with this. Now, we have 8 districts who have voluntarily set aside this past year. Moving forward this next year, we had 23 districts that were identified for significant disproportionality. You received this information last November in the large data mail-out. So superintendents, directors received this notification. If you were one of those 23, there have been changes in the regulatory environment that you need to be aware of. The previous administration set down the new regulations for significant disproportionality, and any district that is found to be disproportionate is required to set aside 15% of special education funding for CEIS. The current administration tried to delay that, and they were successful for a while, but then a court negated the delay. So we are now under the requirement, regulatory requirement, to find districts that are significantly disproportionate and require them to set aside that funding. So starting next school year, any district that was significantly disproportionate in last year's notification will be required to set aside a full 15% of special education funding for CEIS. So we will notify you of that in the coming weeks, remind you of that, let you know what you need to do and how to do that. We will have a webinar on that information. But if you are one of those 23, that could potentially have a significant impact on services in your district. So check your documentation and be aware of that. But that's for next year. So for now, these are the 8 districts that set aside voluntarily this year, and so these are the districts that must give us student numbers. If you're not one of these 8, this is what that should look like. So just enter 2 zeros on this page, on your district summary data page for CEIS. If you do enter numbers, we will ignore them because you didn't set aside, you weren't one of the 8, and we will just pretend you didn't enter anything there. So just enter those zeros and we will move forward. Okay, so any other questions about any of that to this point? Indicator 11, Indicator 12, Personnel, or CEIS? Nope. Okay. So we'll move on to student level data. This is data that we will retrieve automatically from EdPlan at the student level. You need to review this data before we retrieve it to make sure that it reflects your district in the most accurate way possible. So we pull exiting reasons, dates and exiting reasons. We pull secondary transition compliance. We pull early childhood environments and outcomes, actually just outcomes right now, environments we pull in the fall, and we pull discipline information. Okay, we also will be pulling the eligibility timeline report, not to use that for reporting purposes, but to verify the data you submit to us. So if there are concerns on that report that you have, let us know. And if we have major concerns with what we see, disparities between the two, we'll be contacting you. Okay, so exiting first. The purpose of this data poll, we have to report the count of students who exited district by reason between the ages of 14 and 21/22. So 21 as of child count. They may be 22 when they exit. The reasons for exit that we include and report are dropped out of school and unknown. Unknown is reported as dropped out, so if you do not clean up your unknowns, they will be counted as dropped out. We report deceased, exceeded maximum age, graduated, transferred to another school system, and even though it's not a true exit from the district, we report return to regular ed for LNH and homeschool. Those two are actually exits from district, but if you have a student who's returned to regular ed because they've met their special education services needs, they no longer need services, then that's a return to regular ed, but not a real exit from the district. So do not exit your students determined no longer eligible for special education from Ed Plan. Just leave them in there, complete your non-eligibility paperwork, process all of that as you normally would, but you do not need to exit them. Okay. So enter your correct exit dates and exit reasons. You can update it if you need to correct it. So if you find that for some reason a student who graduated is listed in Ed Plan as a dropout, just go open their inactive record, click on exit info at the top, and correct that exit information. You do not need to reactivate the student and exit them a second time. If you do that, it will overwrite the exit and you'll have missing information. Just update that exit information from the inactive record. We can help you with that if you have questions about how to do that the first time. So again, if you need to update an exit reason or a date, just go to the inactive record of the student. At the top, you will see exit info. Click on that, open it, and change the information there. You do not need to reactivate and inactivate the student again. Again, unknown is a temporary exit status. Correct those if you know them. And then exit your high school students who are graduating prior to June 30th. So if you have a student who's going to graduate in May, make sure you exit them prior to June 30th. If they're going to graduate in the fall because they have to complete summer school, wait to graduate them. This does not apply to those students who have to complete summer school. But if you have students exiting because they've graduated, do not wait until the fall to process them in Ed Plan. That will cause problems for your exit data. Make sure your graduates are graduated and exited in Ed Plan. Now, for districts that only go through 8th grade, do not exit your 8th graders as graduates. They are not graduating with a high school diploma. Leave them in your system. They will transfer over to the new district when they enroll in the fall. You don't need to do anything with them. If you want to exit as transfer, you can, but it's best just to leave them there, and they will just roll over. Final point on this, for your graduates, if your IEP is due prior to June 30th, but after graduation, at or after graduation, you do not need to refinalize an IEP. If the IEP is due prior to graduation, you will need to refinalize the IEP. IEPs must be current at exit. Okay, IEPs must be current at exit or you will have non-compliance for secondary transition. So check on those. Make sure your graduates that their IEPs are active, up to date, and current as of their date of graduation. Okay. So that leads into secondary transition. This is our third 100% compliance indicator that we have to report at this time of year. We have to report the percentage of students whose IEPs meet all secondary transition requirements, and there are 8 of them in IDEA. So I'm not going to go through these. You should know them, but we do have to report how many students meet this. Now, we have a shorthand in Oklahoma. So rather than looking at every single IEP for students 16 through 21 or 9th grade and older, we use EdPlan to assist us with monitoring compliance. So as you should know, if you do any secondary IEPs, in order to finalize the IEP, you have to have updated goal information and other things. You have to complete that transition section in the IEP in order to finalize it. So as long as the student has an up-to-date current IEP, we consider the district compliant on that record. Okay? So what that means is that you should always have your secondary students with current up-to-date IEPs. If they are a month late, they are considered non-compliant. If they are 3 months late, 5 days late, those will be non-compliant. And if they are out of date as of June 30th, you will be flagged for non-compliance on Indicator 13. So make sure you get all IEPs of your secondary students refinalized if they are due prior to June 30th. If they have due dates after June 30th, then you can wait until the fall to do those, or you can do them now and just get them up to date. Okay? It's very important. Technically, we should be flagging noncompliance and late IEPs throughout the year for all students, no matter what age, but we don't have the capacity to do that. We use end-of-year reporting to make these findings of noncompliance, and so having those completed on June 30th is really important. We had several districts last year that had 2 or 3 out-of-date IEPs as of June 30th, and they were flagged for this, and it was simply that they hadn't refinalized in time. So make sure you get those done. Okay, early childhood data. This, we have 2 data elements that we pull throughout the year. One is EC environments, and we pull that in the fall with child count. The other is early childhood outcomes, and this comes from, both of these come from the early childhood data page in EdPlan. It's on the IEP process page. And we have to report the learned skills outcomes of very young students, so our 3 to 5-year-olds. OSDE wants to know how they have improved over time due to services. So the criteria for data entry, all students ages 3 to 5.5 must have entrance ratings. So if a student is less than 5.5 years old, when they enter the early childhood program, whether that's pre-K or just coming for services, or they enter kindergarten at the age of 5 and receive special education services, if they are receiving special education services in any way between the ages of 3 to 5, you need to enter an entrance rating. Okay? You need to add exit ratings if they have received services for 6 or more months. So, what we pull at this time of year, we pull a list of students who have or will turn 6 between July 1 and June 30th. We check to see if they have had 6 months of service. If they have had 6 months of service, based on the entry and exit dates on the childhood outcomes page, then we have to report them. If you do not have exit ratings, you will be marked as having insufficient data for that student, and that will be marked off on your performance on your determination. So we need to make sure, you guys need to make sure that all of your students, if they've had 6 months of service and they're turning 6 this year, that they have their entry and exit ratings. If you have a kiddo who will turn 6 after June 30th, that student will be counted next fiscal year. You can enter the data this year if you want, or you can wait until the fall, but we will count them next year. But if they turn 6 prior to this June 30th, you need to have the entry and exit ratings. Okay. We need the dates, we need the ratings, and we need the improvement, yes or no. So these are those, we have 3 outcomes that we look at and have to report: social and emotional skills, acquiring and using knowledge and skills, and then taking appropriate action. So we need the dates of ratings and those ratings themselves, and then whether progress was made, yes or no. Any questions about that? That one's pretty straightforward. Last year, so as you may recall, early childhood outcomes is one of our performance measures on the determination. And most of the districts that didn't meet the target for this indicator, it was simply because they hadn't entered their early childhood outcome data. So make sure you get the data in there so that you're not flagged as not meeting target. Of course, you may not meet target for other reasons, and that's okay, but you don't want it to be because you haven't entered your data. Yes, there is a report that shows missing information. This is in the Early Childhood Outcomes report in advanced reporting. Okay, so discipline. We are also required annually to report all disciplinary removals for students with IEPs, all ages 3 to 21, according to OSEP's reporting requirements. So they identify 4 types of disciplinary removals that we have to report. In-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, something called unilateral removal to interim alternative educational setting, and then removals by hearing officers. The latter 2 are not very common. If you happen to have one, you probably know it. They are for extreme circumstances that don't typically happen. But if you have questions about that, let us know. We do have documentation that will assist in identifying these, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Out-of-school suspensions are pretty typically easy to identify. If a student goes home for any reason for disciplinary purposes, then that's considered an out-of-school suspension. Even if it's for a couple hours before the end of the day, if for disciplinary reasons you call the parents to come get the student, that is an out-of-school suspension per OSEP. Okay, so you have to report that as that. In-school suspensions are the trickiest. So in-school suspensions, we know that in some districts, what the district considers a suspension may not be as complete as what OSEP considers a suspension. So if a student is removed from their current educational placement for any reason related to discipline, it is considered a suspension. So we call those de facto suspensions. So if you send a student from their current placement, maybe they're in the gen ed classroom, maybe they are in the special ed classroom, you send them to the principal's office for half a day for disciplinary reasons. That is a suspension. If you send them to the library for half a day for disciplinary reasons, that is a suspension. If a student is normally in the general education classroom and you send them to the special education classroom for half a day for disciplinary reasons when they normally would not go there per their IEP, that is an in-school suspension and it needs to be reported as such. Okay? There are a few qualifications on this. If students have in their IEP that for behavioral reasons they can go to the special education classroom to cool down or whatever language you use, and students do that, then that is not considered a disciplinary removal. So it depends on the placement options in the IEP, but you need to be careful of that. We only report federally the amount of the cumulative disciplinary removals of half a day or more. So if you have a student who was removed from the classroom for 1 hour throughout the whole year, they only got, a 1 hour suspension through the whole year. It is your choice whether you want to put that into EdPlan or not. So we would not report that federally because it did not meet the half-day base minimum. We only report students who had at least half a day cumulative total removals. Okay, so make sure you watch that. You are welcome to put that into EdPlan for reporting and documentation, but we will not report that federally, and you won't be held accountable for that. However, any student who, let's say they had 1 hour in March, and an hour in February, 3 hours in January, 4 hours last fall, you must report each of those removals because cumulatively, those hours have added up to more than half a day of removal. Okay, so you need to include each of those individual removals in EdPlan. The Our hope and goal one day is to pull this information from student information systems. Unfortunately, a large portion of districts in the state, the vendor that they use for the student information system doesn't report discipline to the state. So we cannot use that at this time, and we need you to report these removals in Ed Plan for your special education students. You do not need to report 504s. You do not need to report general education students, only your special education students. And if a student has moved since the removal took place, if they've changed districts or dropped out or whatever, you need to go back into the inactive record, reactivate it, and enter the disciplinary removal if it accumulates to more than half a day. Okay, so to enter the information, go to open the student record, open the discipline information tab for the student, and start entering your discipline information. You will first be asked to report whether services were provided, so enter yes or no, and then hit enter any days if you did not provide services, and then this next box will pop up. So if you don't have very many removals throughout the year, this is a great way to report information, just one student at a time. It doesn't take long if you don't have a lot of removals. If, however, you have a lot of removals that you have to report, maybe you haven't been keeping them up to date throughout the year, maybe only now you're getting your reports from your principals, then you're probably going to have a lot to enter. Doing that one by one can take quite a bit of time. So we have a template that you can use to upload all disciplinary information. We will walk you through that. We're happy to help you with that the first time you do that. A lot of large districts do that on a regular basis. It works quite well, and it will save you having to reactivate and inactivate all of your inactive students. It will update those automatically, and it will save you from having to enter all of those drop-downs that you see on the tab here. Okay, the problem is with that template, if anything in it is incorrect, you would have to go and delete those disciplinary entries and re-enter them by hand. Okay. Anytime a disciplinary entry has to be changed, you have to delete it and enter it a second time. There is no way to correct a disciplinary entry once it's entered. So you need to be aware of that. Make sure you enter it correctly the first time. So we do have some guidance for you. We have a couple of things. We have the templates for uploading discipline, and we have 2 of those. We can help you with those. We also have 2 documents that can walk you through how to identify which category of disciplinary removal a particular removal falls. So if you're not sure if it's out of school or in school, or if it's an IAES or a removal from hearing officer, we have a document that will guide you through those decisions. And it's called, we have 2 actually, our end of year reporting manual, data collection manual, has a whole section on discipline. We also have something called Discipline for Principals. And this is a shorter document. It's only, I think, 4 or 5 pages. You can download that from our website, give it to your principals even, that's the purpose, so that they know how to report special education removals. Or you can use that, and it's basically a question and answer flowchart. So it asks a couple of questions and says, did this happen or did this happen? If A happened, then you jump to question 5. If B happened, you jump to question 2, and you just process through those questions and answer each of those to determine what type of removal you have and how to report that. So it's a pretty handy document if you're not sure what you need to be doing for removals. But again, they need to be reported in a specific way regardless of how your district defines a suspension. OSEP has different guidelines for reporting than most districts do, so it's important to follow those. Okay. Let's move on to certification. So superintendents must certify between July 2nd and July 16 in single sign-on. When they go into single sign-on, they need to open the special education child count system. Under district profile, they will see a certify end of year button. It is not there yet. It will show up on July 2nd if all goes well. We've been talking with our IT contractors who manage single sign-on to make sure it does not open early. If it does happen to open early and superintendents certify early, we will erase those. You cannot certify data that is not final, and it's not final until July 1. So make sure your superintendents wait until July 2nd to certify. Now, when they go into the system, they will see no data. There is no end-of-year data in single sign-on. So make sure they know that, because they may be surprised if they don't, that there's nothing in there. So what they are certifying is what is in EdPlan. And we'll walk through that in the next slide, what data they will be certifying. But it doesn't freeze in EdPlan either. So when certification happens, EdPlan stays active, it stays live, and changes can be made. Those changes will not show in single sign-on. So if you find that you have changes, make sure you notify your superintendents and go from there. Because it does not freeze, we highly, highly recommend that you download a set of reports. You download the exit report, secondary transition, all of those end-of-year reports that are available in advanced reporting. You make screenshots or otherwise download the data from your district summary data page, because when you go back in a few months to verify what you submitted and does it match what we have on our district summary data, district data profile pages, the only way that you will know what that looked like is if you have copies of those reports. You will not be able to reproduce those reports several months later because EdPlan doesn't freeze on that date. So make sure you make copies of those reports. Once you make copies, of course, you can give them to your superintendent so they can see the data, or you can have them look at the EdPlan reports directly in the system, however you want to do that. But they are certifying EdPlan. They are not certifying anything in single sign-on. So this is what they will certify. They are certifying that data is complete and accurate. They are certifying that exit dates and reasons are complete and accurate, that you have correct early childhood outcomes, secondary transition compliance, and disciplinary removals are reported. So they are certifying that all removals have been reported for your special education students. So if you're not including certain removals and they certify, and we notice later that those removals are there, there may be some compliance issues that we will have to report. From the district summary data page, they are certifying that your personnel FTE counts are correct, that your initial consent counts and causes for delay are correct, and that your early childhood transition information is correct. So verify all of those, share that information with your superintendent so they know what they're certifying, and so forth. Once they certify, so we use certification to make sure, it's the only marker we have that you and your superintendent have looked at the data, verified that it's correct, and agree with the data submission. So once certification happens, we assume that you agree with the data. So make sure it's correct prior to certification. Okay. So a few notes on resources. We have several guidance documents. We have several templates for you to use on our website. We have the end-of-year data collection manual, which will be up this week. We have the discipline walkthrough. We have a lot of information on early childhood environments and outcomes. So check that information. We also have the non-compliance templates for 45-day timeline and EC transition delays. We have the discipline uploads. We have the personnel FTE calculator. All of this is on our website. We will have the slides posted this week. We will also have this webinar posted this week. So feel free to go and look at those again if you have questions, and all of that information will be posted. So you can print this presentation once it's posted on our website. Okay, so briefly about advanced reporting tools. If you haven't been in advanced reporting, you need to get in there immediately because this is our main data reporting source. What you see in these end-of-year reports is what we pull. So if you see problems with your data, we will see problems with your data. So make sure these reports reflect your district accurately. So to get there in EdPlan, You just go to the reporting dropdown and select Advanced Reporting. It will open an entirely new window. It won't look anything like EdPlan. Okay, there will be probably a big white box and then folders links down the left. So open the public folders, OK Reports, and then open the library folder. You will also see a folder that says something like OK Norman Reports or something like that. That's for you to use to save reports into. We do not post anything there. All of the reports that we use and post are posted in the library folder. Then open the end of year folder. And these are the reports that are there. We have an eligibility timeline report and an early childhood transition report. These are for your information only. These are not, we don't use them for reporting because of the reports are just not quite accurate yet. They don't reflect everything that we need them to reflect. Particularly early childhood transition, if a parent leaves between consent and eligibility or leaves between referral and their 3rd birthday, there's no good way of documenting that in EdPlan. So it just looks like that child just exists there and nothing has happened while you know something has happened. So we can't use that yet. So we need you to report those. We have an exiting report, secondary transition, early childhood outcomes, and the discipline incident and discipline report. What you see in exiting, secondary transition, early childhood outcomes, and discipline incident is what we see and what we pull. So make sure it's accurate. Each of these reports, except for discipline, has error tabs or red flags tabs. Look at those, make sure they're correct. Refer to the AR, the Advanced Reporting Primer. We have a manual on our website to look at those reports and make sure you understand those correctly. We are in the process of updating that. There's a current version on our website that you can use, but we will be updating that soon. But the information there is still valid. So refer to that. If you have questions about those reports, give us a call, and we will walk you through them. But if you don't look at them, then you have no way of knowing if your data is correct. In terms of credit for webinars, we count participation in this webinar for the participation bonus for training for child count and end of year, so you will get credit for that. We do not offer certificates or certainly not CEUs, nothing like that for the webinar, but we can verify participation if you can count that for PD for any reason. On the website, it'll be on our data page and on the State Department of Ed Special Education website. We have a data page and end of year collection page where most of this will be posted. They should be up hopefully by Friday. It does take a few days because we have to rely on a couple of different folks to get the web pages updated, but hopefully by Friday we will have most of this information on the website. Okay, what other kinds of questions do you have at this point? We are happy to talk to you at any time. You can call Travis, Tristan, or me. You can email us, and we are happy to answer your data questions. We want your data to be as accurate and complete as possible because it reflects well on the state as a whole. If you don't have complete data, we will be contacting you to make sure that it's completed and accurate. Should reports be printed on June 30th if they can be printed on the last day of school if no changes have been made? Yes, probably. You may want to double check around the end of June that nothing has changed, because data doesn't freeze in EdPlan. If you have a new student come in suddenly or something like that, your data could change and you want to make sure that that is accurate. So we recommend waiting, but if you want to pull at the end of May, you can. You just can't certify until July 2nd. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for participating, and I'm sure that we will hear from some of you soon. Thanks very much.